The 9,992nd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Egypt, Jordan, Kuwait, Iraq, Israel, Qatar, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. I request the protocol officer to escort His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al-Thani, Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar, to his seat at the Council table. On behalf of the Council, I welcome His Excellency Mr. Ayman Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Expatriate of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Thank you, Mr. President. We gather yet again as the scope of violence in the Middle East has widened, further threatening regional security and stability. Israel's airstrikes in Doha, Qatar on 9 September shocked the world. It was an alarming escalation, especially since it targeted individuals who were reportedly gathered to discuss the latest U.S. proposal for a ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza. The Secretary General condemned this strike as a violation of Qatar's sovereignty and territorial integrity. He calls on member states to ensure respect for their obligations under international law, including the principles of the United Nations Charter. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of any country, including Qatar, a valued partner in advancing peacemaking and conflict resolution, must be respected. According to statements by Qatar, Israel targeted residential compounds housing members of the political bureau of Hamas around 15:45 local time on Tuesday. Hamas stated that the son of its chief negotiator, Khalil al-Hayya, as well as his office manager and 3 other people affiliated with the group, were killed. Hamas also said its senior leadership survived the attack. According to Qatar, 1 Qatari security officer was killed and 7 other security personnel were injured. Qatar's foreign ministry immediately condemned the attack, saying this criminal assault constitutes a blatant violation of all international laws and norms that posed a serious threat to the security and safety of the country. Israel claimed responsibility for the attack as soon as the news broke. Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that the strike was a wholly independent Israeli operation after the fatal attack in Jerusalem on 8 September, for which Hamas claimed responsibility. Many countries in the region and beyond, as well as regional organizations including the Gulf Cooperation Council, the League of Arab States, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, condemned the attack and expressed concern about further escalation. Mr. President, in less than a month, we will mark the second anniversary of the horrific acts of terror that sparked the hostilities in Gaza. In these 2 years, the conflict has killed tens of thousands of people, mostly civilians, and almost completely destroyed Gaza. The situation in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, has continued to spiral downward. This period has also seen dangerous escalations across the region, involving Iran, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. The Israeli attack on Doha potentially opens a new and perilous chapter in this devastating conflict, seriously threatening regional peace and stability. Qatar, along with Egypt and the United States, has been working intensively to broker a ceasefire and hostage release agreement in Gaza. Efforts aimed at ending the suffering and paving a path toward peace. We are deeply grateful for Qatar's steadfast commitment and constructive diplomacy. All parties must act to preserve these efforts. Regrettably, Israel's actions came at the height of ongoing consultations with the parties. Any action that undermines the work of mediation and dialogue weakens confidence in the very mechanisms we depend on for conflict resolution. Preserving the integrity of negotiation and mediation channels is crucial for fostering the trust that parties need to engage in meaningful dialogue. It is also vital for safeguarding the norms that underpin diplomacy and peacemaking. Durable and just solutions to the crises in the Middle East will not come out of more violence and more fighting. I call on all stakeholders to exercise utmost restraint at this sensitive time and recommit to diplomacy. The urgency of a ceasefire and hostage release deal in Gaza has never been greater. Strike a deal, free the hostages, end the suffering of the people of Gaza. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, President. At the outset, I would like to thank Under-Secretary General DiCarlo for her briefing. We meet once again in the wake of yet another grave and unlawful act committed by the Israeli authorities, in addition to the endless record of their systematic violations of international law. Israel behaves as if law does not exist, as if borders are illusions, as if sovereignty itself is a dispensable notion, as if the UN Charter is an ephemeral text. Meanwhile, in Gaza, innocent lives are annihilated by the thousands. The world watches helplessly horrific image of destruction, devastation, and human despair. Yet, even that current carnage in Gaza is not enough for the Israeli authorities. In the span of days, Israel has struck Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and now a renowned peace broker, the state of Qatar. This is not strength. It is recklessness. It is a sign of madness. It is the conduct of an extremist government unborn by immunity, by impunity. A government dragging the region and the whole world toward the abyss. Mr. President, Algeria strongly condemns and denounces the cowardly Israeli aggression that targeted the Qatari capital, Doha. We express our full solidarity with the brotherly state and people of Qatar. The recent attack in Doha is more than a violation of sovereignty of a UN member. It is an affront to diplomacy itself. It targeted a commended mediator working tirelessly to end the bloodshed in Gaza. It is irrefutable proof that the Israeli occupying power does not seek peace, does not seek peace, does not seek the release of hostages, does not seek the end of hostilities, but thrive on war. President, Israel persists in relying solely on the arrogance of brutality, mistaking oppression for power and coercion for security. Yet, history taught us that the path of domination yields neither peace nor stability. Violence brings violence. Impunity breeds war. Silence in the international community and of this very Security Council fuels chaos. And yet, this very Council remains constrained, unable even to name the aggressor, to qualify aggression as a violation of international law. Mr. President, when will the international community awaken to its responsibilities? When will it deter the occupier? When will it halt the crimes and curb this reckless escalation threatening the entire region? The region, and indeed the world, demand meaningful action. Action to end aggression. Action to hold the occupying power accountable. Action to break the cycle of impunity. This Council must use all its tools, including sanctions, before it is too late. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank you for convening this urgent meeting at the request of Algeria, Pakistan, and Somalia, and supported by other Council members. We also thank Under Secretary General De Carlo for her briefing. We welcome the presence of His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al-Thani, the Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar. We also welcome the participation of the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Jordan, the representatives of UAE, Turkey, Iraq, Kuwait, and Egypt to this meeting. Pakistan condemns in the strongest possible terms the illegal and unprovoked Israeli aggression against the brotherly state of Qatar. This reckless and provocative attack constitutes a flagrant violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar, contrary to the fundamental principles of international law, including the UN Charter, in particular its Article 2(4), prohibiting the threat or use of force. As the Prime Minister of Pakistan has stated, this act of aggression by Israel is totally unjustified and constitutes a most dangerous provocation that could imperil regional peace and stability. The Israeli strikes targeted a residential neighborhood, deliberately endangering civilians, and thus also constitute a grave breach of international humanitarian law. This brazen and illegal assault is not an isolated incident. Rather, it is part of a broader and consistent pattern of aggression and violation of international law by Israel that undermines regional peace and stability. Pakistan expresses its complete solidarity with the government and people of Qatar and fully supports their inalienable right to take all necessary measures in accordance with the UN Charter to defend their sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the safety of all persons within their territory. In a gesture of solidarity and regional unity, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, His Excellency Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif, accompanied by a high-level delegation, including the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Pakistan, is visiting Qatar today. The visit underscores Pakistan's unwavering support for the security and sovereignty of Qatar and its commitment to peace and stability in the Middle East. Mr. President, this irresponsible action by Israel is yet another manifestation of its systematic disregard for international law and its brazen policy of destabilizing the region. It adds to its long and dubious record of aggression, brutal military actions in Gaza, repeated cross-border strikes in Syria, Lebanon, Iran, and Yemen, all of which amount to violations of the UN Charter and international humanitarian law. Such acts of aggression, as defined by UN General Assembly Resolution 3314, also set a dangerous precedent, erode the primacy of rule of law, and breed a culture of impunity that threatens the security of all states. In view of the gravity of the situation, an extraordinary Arab-Islamic summit will take place in Doha on 15 September, with a view to ensuring a united response to Israel's aggression and to reaffirm the primacy of international law and the UN Charter. Pakistan will participate in this important meeting at the high level. Mr. President, at a time when delicate negotiations on Gaza peace deal were progressing towards a possible breakthrough, striking the territory of a principal mediator and those directly involved in negotiations is a deliberate attempt to sabotage diplomacy, derail peace efforts, and prolong the suffering of civilians. It is evident that Israel, the occupying power, is bent on doing everything to undermine and blow up every possibility of peace. It also raises serious questions whether the return of hostages was indeed a priority. Clearly, Israel's destructive policies are incompatible with the international community's quest for peace and stability. Sadly, it has been emboldened by the weak response and inaction by this Council. Pakistan commends Qatar's important and constructive role in facilitating mediation efforts, including for a ceasefire and release of hostages, which has been widely and consistently appreciated by all Council members, together with the role of Egypt and the United States. We recognize Qatar's tireless and principled engagement with all parties, often under most challenging circumstances, to keep the channels of dialogue open and advance prospects of peace. Qatar has consistently demonstrated leadership, wisdom, and commitment to humanitarian principles, working in close coordination with regional and international partners to bridge divides, promote peace, reduce tensions, and alleviate the plight of the Palestinian people. Undermining such a credible and indispensable mediator threatens to extinguish one of the few viable pathways towards a just and lasting peace. Targeting Qatar is thus not only an attack on a sovereign state, but also an attack on diplomacy and mediation itself. Pakistan welcomes the Security Council's condemnation of the strikes in Doha and expression of support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar in line with the principles of the UN Charter. The Council must go beyond, must hold Israel accountable, safeguard the role and protection of mediators engaged in peace efforts, and recommit to the centrality of international law and the UN Charter in maintaining international peace and security. Mr. President, the root cause of recurring crises and instability in the Middle East is Israel's prolonged occupation of Arab lands and its persistent defiance of international law and international legitimacy. Durable peace can only be achieved through a comprehensive political settlement, including an end to the occupation of Arab lands, particularly the occupied Palestinian territories. Pakistan calls for an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire across Gaza and all occupied Palestinian territories. Full and unimpeded humanitarian access to the besieged and starved Palestinian population, and reinvigoration of a genuine and irreversible political process to end the Israeli occupation, leading to the realization of a sovereign, viable, and contiguous Palestinian state based on the pre-1967 borders, with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. Pakistan stands shoulder to shoulder with the leadership and the brotherly people of Qatar in defense of their sovereignty, dignity, and territorial integrity. We remain steadfast in our commitment to uphold the principles of international law and the UN Charter, and to work with the international community to secure lasting peace in the Middle East. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank Korean Presidency for the prompt convening of this emergency meeting. I also want to thank USG Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo for her comprehensive briefings on the alarming development unfolding in the Middle East. We welcome the participation in this meeting of His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al-Thani, the Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Qatar. His Excellency Ayman Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan, as well as the representatives from the region, mainly UAE, Turkey, Iraq, Kuwait, and Egypt. Mr. President, the Israeli airstrikes on residential areas in Doha, the capital of Qatar, on September 9th marks a grave and perilous escalation. It has far-reaching consequences, not only for the countries directly involved, but for the entire region and beyond. We unequivocally condemn this brazen act of aggression, which is a flagrant violation of Qatar's sovereignty and territorial integrity and risks the destabilizing an already fragile region. Such actions are in direct defiance of the core principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter, notably Article 2, Paragraph 4, which prohibits the threat or use of force against any state's territorial integrity or political independence. Somalia stands in solidarity with the sisterly state of Qatar and supports its right to take all necessary measures to safeguard its sovereignty and security. Our delegation extends its deepest condolence to the government and people of Qatar for the loss of lives and wishes a speedy recovery to all injured. This attack by Israel on a residential area housing embassies and schools shows the blatant disregard for human life. Mr. President, these consequences are not merely coincidence. Israel's systematic expansion of the conflict zone from Gaza to Lebanon, then to Iran, Syria, Yemen, and now Qatar, is a deliberate strategy. This military strike unfolded when negotiators engaged in talks over the US-backed ceasefire proposal. It was aimed at undermining the ongoing mediation efforts in the conflict in Gaza, striving for immediate and unconditional ceasefire, the release of all arbitrarily detained, including those whom we have heard the pleas of their loved ones in this chamber, and unhindered humanitarian access to the civilian population, mainly women and children suffering from the IBC's declared man-made famine by Israel. History has shown that every escalation and military attack only dims the already fragile hope for peace in the Middle East. We call on all parties to exercise restraint and avoid further escalation that will worsen the suffering and instability in the region. Qatar's role as mediator in seeking to end this conflict has been invaluable and deserves recognition, not retaliation. Attacking those who are actively working to bring peace to the long-standing conflict in the occupied Palestinian land undermines the very goals we all share. The Security Council bears a clear responsibility to uphold international peace and security. To remain silent or inactive in the face of this brazen violation of the sovereignty will be to reduce international law to a mere suggestion, subject to the will of the aggressors. We cannot allow these actions to continue or become an accepted practice. We call on all Council members to unite with determination to immediately condemn this aggression and renew efforts for a dialogue and diplomacy without delay. True and lasting peace in the Middle East demands confronting the well-known root causes of perpetual instability in accordance with international law and its covenants. To conclude, Mr. President, Somalia reaffirms its unwavering solidarity with the people of Qatar and joins the international community in demanding a swift return to diplomacy and adherence to international legal norms and the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, and we welcome Korea's presidency of the Council this month. I would like to thank Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for your briefing. And the United States would like to offer our sincere condolences to the family of the Qatari Internal Security Force member killed in the attack. I would also like to welcome our distinguished guests today, Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al-Thani, Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi, His Excellency Dr. Anwar Gargash, who are all with us. Unilateral bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation working very hard and bravely taking risks alongside the United States to broker peace, does not advance Israel's or America's goals. That said, it is inappropriate for any member to use this to question Israel's commitment to bringing their hostages home. Eliminating Hamas, which has profited off of the misery of those living in Gaza, is a worthy goal. Hamas and other terrorists must have no future in Gaza. Only after the terror group's removal can Gaza advance toward a better future, and can Israel be secure within its own borders. Colleagues, President Trump wants all of the hostages, living and dead, released, and this war to end now. And it will end if Hamas disarms, releases the hostages, and surrenders. But right now, Hamas continues to threaten Israel's security and deliberately prolong the anguish. That anguish must come to an end. Hamas must immediately release the remaining hostages, including all of those hostages brutally murdered. Prime Minister Netanyahu reiterated to President Trump his desire for peace when the two spoke yesterday. Notwithstanding the unfortunate nature of this incident, President Trump believes it could serve as an opportunity for peace. The President assured the Emir, as well as the Prime Minister of Qatar, that such a thing would not happen again on their soil. The United States will continue to work to release all the hostages, reach a ceasefire, provide humanitarian assistance, and end this conflict. Council and UN member states must continue to pressure Hamas to release the hostages, disarm, and surrender, rather than give the terrorist group a lifeline. Mr. President, the United States has worked tirelessly with Qatar and Egypt to end this horrific conflict. The region's people deserve a path forward, full of opportunity and free of Hamas. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing. I also welcome the participation of His Excellency the Prime Minister of Qatar and His Excellency the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Mr. President, we find today's meeting on the recent Israeli strike targeting the political bureau of Hamas in Doha to be of particular importance. We are gravely concerned about the strike in Doha. It constitutes a violation of Qatar's territorial sovereignty and is contrary to international law. Any further escalation in the region is of deep concern to us, and we call for an immediate de-escalation. We also note that the strike is not conducive to negotiations toward reaching a ceasefire. Qatar has played a crucial and sensitive role in hosting and mediating ongoing negotiations between Israel and Hamas alongside the US and Egypt. We reiterate that the use of force must be at all times aligned with international law. Equally, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states must be upheld as a matter of principle. Greece
has condemned on multiple occasions and in the strongest possible terms the October 7 terrorist attacks perpetrated by Hamas. We continue to call for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages inhumanely held ever since. We firmly believe that Hamas, as a terrorist organization, cannot and should not have any political role in the future governance of Gaza. Similarly, we unequivocally condemned the recent terrorist attack in East Jerusalem. Both are abhorrent incidents which highlight the urgency of reaching a political solution, one that will bring stability and prosperity, breaking the cycle of violence. In this context, disrupting ongoing diplomatic efforts is dangerous. Mr. President, dear colleagues, the diplomatic channel spearheaded by the US, Egypt, and Qatar has provided thus far the only credible pathway for ending the suffering. It was through this channel that some hostages could rejoin their loved ones in the beginning of the year. It was through this channel that a ceasefire, allowing for much-needed relief for the suffering Palestinian population, was brokered back in January. As this suffering in Gaza continues and hostages remain in the captivity of Hamas, a ceasefire is once again sorely needed. Dialogue, no matter how fragile, must therefore be protected. It is absolutely necessary and essential for moving towards de-escalation and lasting peace. Echoing the statement of the Secretary General, we urge all parties to recommit to the diplomatic process with a sense of utmost urgency. The road ahead is difficult and challenging. Efforts aiming at a ceasefire must not be derailed. Only a ceasefire, paving the way for a political two-state solution, will allow for the spiral of violence to end. It must come to an end now. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we thank the presidency for the prompt convening of the meeting in connection with Israeli strikes on Qatar at the request of Algeria, with support from Somalia, Pakistan, France, and the United Kingdom. We are grateful to the Undersecretary General, Rosemary DiCarlo, for the briefing. We attentively studied the position of the Qatari side, which was set out in the letter which was circulated on the 9th of September. We believe that such assessments of what transpired will be provided by the Prime Minister, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Qatar. We welcome your participation, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Minister, as well as the Minister of Representative of Jordan, as well as other participants. Mr. President, the Russian Federation condemns in no uncertain terms the attack carried out by Israel on 9 September targeting a residential compound in Doha, the stated target of which was the senior leadership of the Palestinian Hamas movement. As a result of this egregious attack, according to preliminary reports, 6 people died, including a staff member of the Interior Ministry of Qatar, and Emirati citizens died. We are very much concerned by the fact that the Israeli Air Force carried out strikes targeting a residential area in the Qatari capital, where foreign missions are carried out, where foreign missions are located. The Russian diplomatic mission is 600 meters from the area of the attack, as well as there are homes there and busy roads, as well as schools and kindergartens. In other words, the victim of this large-scale airstrike, which was carried out in the middle of the working day at 15:45 local time, could have been far greater. The number of casualties could have been far greater. These are innocent civilians, including our diplomatic colleagues, their wives, and their children. They're in an egregious violation of the sovereignty of states, as well as the creation of grave threats to the safety of ordinary civilians, have no justification. We fully share the assessments of the Secretary General about the inadmissibility of Israeli strikes targeting Qatar, which represents an encroachment upon the territorial integrity of an independent state. We also agree with the statement of the SG about the positive role of Qatar and its intention to focus on putting an end to the conflict, which has lasted for nearly 2 years, the war in the Gaza Strip, which has lasted for nearly 2 years. What is particularly cynical is the fact that Doha, as one of the key mediators between Palestinians and Israelis, has over recent months been tirelessly working to end the bloodshed in Gaza and for the release of detained persons. The Hamas leadership, according to reports, was willing to move towards the achievement of these agreements. And precisely when the missile strikes were carried out on 9 September, the leadership of the movement was discussing in Doha the latest proposal of the U.S. Special Envoy, Steve Witkoff. In this way, the strike, which targeted not just Qatar, a sovereign state, which incidentally was not engaged in the Arab-Israeli conflict, but also the strike targeting the efforts of mediators, targeting the very possibility of a diplomatic solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It is clear that this Israeli attack will have grave consequences, both for the already atrocious situation in Gaza and for the security of the vast region of the Middle East. Mr. President, unfortunately, what transpired 2 days ago is no coincidence. This is the logical consequence of the utter impunity of West Jerusalem, which time and time again has been testing the limits of what is possible, and it is opening up new horizons for itself by exploiting the international diplomatic cover provided by Washington. And the carrying out of these unprovoked acts of force by Israel is camouflaged by slogans about imagined threats to the security of the Jewish state at the so-called 7 fronts. We remember perfectly well on the evening of 31 July 2024 in Tehran, the former head of the Hamas Politburo, Ismail Haniyeh, was killed. At that time, the leader of the Palestinian movement was in the Islamic Republic of Iran with an official invitation to participate at the inauguration ceremony of the elected president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian. The political murder was then carried out with the same goal, namely to carry out a major to deal a major blow to the proxy talks between Hamas and Israel, which are geared towards achievement of a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The strike on Qatar, where a major U.S. military base is located, has become a fundamentally new wave of regional escalation. If the Israelis are willing to eliminate their political opponents in a state that is so close to their main ally, what is then stopping them from carrying out similar acts in any other capital in the world? Why then, in principle, why should we, in principle, conduct scrupulous negotiations on a ceasefire and the release of hostages if it is simply possible to place a bullet in the skull of one's interlocutor? Mr. President, the nefarious practice of the liquidation of eminent political and military actors is not merely a crime. This is a desecration of the principles of civilized cooperation among states. This poses threats of uncontrolled escalation. We call upon West Jerusalem to abandon the reckless acts of aggression which provoke the ongoing waves of violence in the region. There is a need for all members of the Council to send a similar message. I believe that it is clear now to all that Washington's stated focus on so-called quiet diplomacy not only is failing to yield results, but this is fraught with generating new risks and further escalating tensions in the already fraught atmosphere. And by specifically referring to that premise, the U.S. delegation has for nearly 2 years been blocking all efforts at the Security Council. It is difficult to identify where lightning needs to strike for Washington to finally recognize that multilateral diplomacy through the Council is not just not an obstacle, but this is the only tool that is available and necessary to reverse the situation on the ground. In this connection, we support the focus of the 10 non-permanent members of the Council to advance a draft Security Council resolution on the situation in Gaza, with an emphasis on the demand for Israel to lift all limitations on the delivery of humanitarian assistance to the Strip. We trust that this product will also incorporate a call for a ceasefire, without which it will be simply impossible to alleviate the humanitarian situation there. We believe that the adoption of the resolution will be an important and effective measure to alleviate the plight of the Palestinian people. Mr. President, to conclude, I wish to once again extend solidarity to the people and leadership of Qatar who have been targeted by the hawkish military political cabinet in Israel. The consolidated detailed consolidated Russian-Arab assessments of this unprovoked act of force and the whole developments in the Middle East were made today in Sochi during the Russian GCC summit. The Security Council also adopted a press statement in connection with the strikes. Unfortunately, this is not, does not incorporate everything that has to be incorporated. Not every spade is called a spade there. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Undersecretary Di Carlo for his sobering briefing. Mr. President, we meet today at a tense moment for the Middle East region, in the wake of Tuesday's Israeli strikes on Hamas targets in Doha. At the outset, let me be clear that this serious violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar is unacceptable. We condemn these strikes in line with the press statement agreed by all Council members. It raises serious questions under international law. Your Excellency Prime Minister Al-Thani, Denmark expresses our most sincere solidarity with you, your government, and the people of the state of Qatar. Thank you for your presence here today and for your commitment to peace, mediation, and multilateral dialogue. I also welcome His Excellency Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Safadi and His Excellency Dr. Gagash to the Council. Mr. President, we've said it before, but it remains equally relevant today. With countless lives at stake across the Middle East, it is imperative that all parties exercise maximum restraint. The region can simply not afford further escalatory spiral of violence. Its people cannot and should not have to bear any more conflict and trauma. At this critical moment, we call on all parties to refrain from steps that risk igniting tensions and deepening regional instability. Diplomacy and dialogue must remain the first ports of call. Mr. President, around this table, we all regularly urge for restraint. All the while, the war in Gaza continues to rage. To be clear, this war must end immediately. Every effort must be made towards this objective, including from this Council. Every day, the devastating humanitarian consequences are made painfully clear. There's famine in Gaza. People are starving to death in Gaza. Civilian infrastructure is destroyed. The list of horrors is long. We have a responsibility to act as a Council, as an international community, as human beings. The immediate priorities remain threefold: an immediate, unconditional, and permanent ceasefire, the unconditional and dignified immediate release of all hostages, and the lifting of all restrictions on humanitarian aid into Gaza. All parties must work urgently towards achieving these aims. Mr. President, Denmark reiterates its firm condemnation of the terrorist attacks on October 7 perpetrated by Hamas. As we have repeated countless times, there can be no justification for this attack, nor for the undignified treatment of the hostages, and there can be no role for Hamas in Gaza. We have also consistently stressed that Israel's response must be exercised in full compliance with international law, including international humanitarian law. In closing, Mr. President, peace cannot be built on the rubble of destroyed buildings and cities, but on the firm foundation of dialogue and negotiation, a foundation that Qatar, along with the United States and Egypt, has been diligently and tirelessly working to create. These efforts have Denmark's full support. They offer a future that conflict never can, a future defined not by fear, not by a constant risk of escalation, but by stability for all countries and all people of the region. This is the challenge that the international community, and especially this Council, must rise to meet. This is not only demanded for the Council, but also the very mission of this organization. We must spare no effort to achieve it. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And I'd like to thank USG DiCarlo for her briefing today. I'd also like to warmly welcome to the Chamber His Excellency the Prime Minister of Qatar, His Excellency the Deputy Prime Minister of Jordan, and His Excellency Dr. Gargash of the UAE. I'll make 3 points. First, let me underscore this from the outset. The United Kingdom stands in full and unwavering solidarity with Qatar and condemns Israel's strikes on Doha. These strikes are a flagrant violation of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar. They risk both further escalation across the region and setting back negotiations for a ceasefire. We offer our condolences to the families and friends of Qatari personnel who were tragically killed. Our thoughts are with their loved ones and with the injured. Qatar has long been a tireless broker for peace in the Middle East and beyond, and we commend the resolute commitment of His Highness the Emir to champion diplomacy and dialogue. So to reiterate, we wholly condemn the strikes on Qatar, which will do nothing to deliver peace in the Middle East or to help safeguard Israel's long-term security. My Prime Minister made this clear to President Herzog when they met yesterday. And like others, I welcome the clear message of support to Qatar that this Council has sent through our press statement today. Second, the UK has been clear that Hamas is a terrorist organisation, and we condemn the October 7 atrocities in the strongest terms. We reiterate that Hamas must release all the hostages, sign up to an immediate ceasefire deal, and commit to disarm. It can play no part in the future governance of Gaza. Third, with each day that passes, the hostages suffer in appalling conditions, and the people of Gaza endure starvation and repeated displacement. This week's evacuation orders across northern Gaza will worsen the humanitarian catastrophe. The Israeli government's decision to further escalate its offensive in Gaza is wrong. And today, I reiterate that we urge Israel to reconsider immediately. We staunchly support the efforts of Qatar, the United States, and Egypt to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza, to secure the release of the hostages and bring this conflict to an end. We urge all parties to re-engage meaningfully to reach a negotiated deal. We also need an urgent surge of humanitarian aid into Gaza. It is abhorrent that famine is unfolding in parts of Gaza City, and we need immediate action to prevent it from spreading further. Israel must lift all restrictions on aid and allow the UN to deliver life-saving aid at scale. President, the only way to achieve lasting peace and security for Palestinians and Israelis alike is through a political solution. The UK will continue to work with our partners to develop a framework for long-term peace consistent with a two-state solution. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank Under-Secretary General DiCarlo for her briefing. I welcome a number of high-level speakers, in particular Prime Minister of Qatar and Deputy Prime Minister of Jordan. Colleagues, sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries across the region violated. Security Council resolutions rejected. General Assembly processes ignored. ICJ decisions disregarded. Advisory opinions ignored. Civilians starved and killed. International mechanisms flouted. The UN pressured. Humanitarian and medical workers, journalists attacked. Inhumanity and simply cruelty. A sense of complete impunity. And now, negotiators attacked on a foreign soil. I wonder, is this how peace is pursued? Is this really a way to bring hostages home? Slovenia is gravely concerned over the latest escalation in the Middle East. We strongly condemn the Israeli attack on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the State of Qatar, and we stand in solidarity with Qatar. We once again call for full respect of the UN Charter and rules of war. Nobody is above the law, no matter how mighty one feels. We commend the crucial and constructive role of Qatar, a key mediator for a ceasefire in Gaza and for the release of hostages. We thank them for their efforts and urge them to continue. This Council has been unequivocal in our support to the role and work of the mediators, Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. Everyone around this table supports the process of mediation. What more can be said in this Council? How else can we say that all the red lines have been crossed and that enough is really enough? Colleagues, it's not the attempts of the Council members that are preventing solutions. It is allowing this sense of impunity of Israel to continue. That's why country after country are announcing bilateral measures aiming at the Israeli government to reconsider its current policy and to return to respecting international law obligations. They are our response to persistent violations of international humanitarian law, to impunity, and to what we now clearly see, a flawed commitment to negotiations. All these measures are not gestures. They are not performative actions. They are sincere acts of countries, leaders, and global public conscious of our responsibility to humanity and of our promise of never again. Colleagues, on this day of 9/11, when we commemorate horrible terror attacks on the United States and pay tribute to innocent victims, Slovenia reaffirms its resolute stand against terrorism. We repeat our condemnation of the Hamas brutal attack on 7 October. We take this opportunity to strongly condemn the latest terror attack on civilians in Jerusalem. This is yet another reason for peace efforts to double. In words of Undersecretary General Di Carlo, the urgency has never been greater. This war must end, suffering must end. Mr. President, in the midst of the latest escalation, Gaza humanitarian catastrophe continues. Window of opportunity to prevent famine from spreading across the Strip is closing. New offensive is relentlessly pounding what is left in the middle of ruins. Instead of packing a backpack to start a new school year, Gaza children are forced to pack what is left of their belongings to be displayed yet again. So let me state the obvious. We need a ceasefire. Hostages must be released. Hindrance of aid deliveries must end. The negotiations have certainly seen its share of obstacles from both parties, but an escalation of this sort is not contributing to peace. So we appeal for a renewed commitment to negotiations in good faith by both parties to the conflict. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for the statement. And I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Panama is grateful for the convening of this emergency meeting, and we're also grateful for the report provided by Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs. Moreover, we welcome His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al-Thani to this meeting as Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar. We wish here to convey to him the solidarity of our country with the people and government of Qatar, as his country and the Middle East region withstand a gravely serious ordeal. Moreover, we hail the presence of His Excellency Ayman Safar, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of Jordan. And we welcome to this meeting the distinguished representatives of the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Iraq, Israel, Kuwait and Turkey. They do us a great honour by being with us today. Panama fervently condemns and repudiates the unstoppable tide of violence in the region of the Middle East. The attacks perpetrated against civilians in Jerusalem on Monday, for which Hamas claimed responsibility, are a demonstration of the extremism and terror that this group has sown for decades. Israel's subsequent action in Doha on Tuesday, that was also condemned by Panama, stands as a reprehensible and flagrant violation, one that stands as an attack on the sovereignty, territorial integrity and security of a member state of this very organization. Such acts are breaches of international law and the United Nations Charter. Moreover, they imperil the most fundamental principles of multilateralism, principles that for our country are the very basis of the peaceful coexistence between states. These facts demonstrate that the continued use of force and force alone has not offered, nor will it be able to offer, a solution to this current war. Neither has this exclusive use of force resolved, or will it be able to resolve, the deep root causes that have caused the Israeli-Palestine conflict to rage on for almost 8 decades. On the contrary, the use of force has simply seen the entrenchment of the logic of extremes. It has fueled a cycle of violence which hinders and indeed blocks any path towards a political solution. The result of these acts has been more uncertainty, greater risk to the entire civilian population, including to the hostages that remain in Gaza, and the weakening of the mediation process spearheaded by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. Attacking a state who is acting as a mediator and who has acted as headquarters for negotiations seeking peace, as is the case with Qatar, is a direct strike on the possibility of achieving a ceasefire in Gaza, a ceasefire which is vital to halt the suffering of the Palestinian civilian population and to open a safe environment to allow the immediate, dignified and unconditional release of all hostages who are now not safer but on the contrary facing even greater risk. These irresponsible actions are not simply a threat to the security of the civilian population. They may also have, and indeed did, imperil accredited diplomatic missions in Doha, including the Embassy of Panama, only a short distance away from the attack, some 100 meters. We wish to express our sincere condolences with the families of the Qatari victims and other victims of this attack. There may have been victims from other friendly countries, and that undermines international friendly efforts to guarantee that we have a stable, safe environment crucial for dialogue and negotiation. Mr. President, what occurred in Doha is part of a spiral of violence, which is also reflected in the attacks waged against a humanitarian flotilla in Tunisia and more generally in the devastating situation in Gaza and the West Bank. Panama prioritizes negotiation and dialogue as the only legitimate pathways towards a lasting peace. With that in mind, we invite parties to demonstrate in deed that they are seeking a genuine peace agreement and not seeking to extend the conflict. Moreover, we here underline the fact that no goal, as legitimate as it may be considered to be, can justify the use of means which violate international law or the principle of protecting human life. Panama asks the parties to exercise the utmost restraint. We urge them to step up their efforts to urgently achieve a sustainable ceasefire to facilitate the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages and to guarantee the safe, appropriate and sustained access of humanitarian aid, vital humanitarian aid to Gaza at scale. The experience of the temporary truce, however short and fragile it was, demonstrated that it is possible to halt human suffering, just as it is to allow the effective delivery of humanitarian aid in an unfettered way and to make progress with releasing the hostages. Mr. President, a source of grave concern is the notion of wishing to justify and wage war on the basis of the premise that the ends justify the means, whatever those ends may be. And this our principles must be upheld, whoever is concerned. The use of this ends justify the means logic will simply sow more destruction and suffering. The indiscriminate witch hunt of enemies does not lead to peace. On the contrary, it merely extends war and worsens the suffering of innocent people that are trapped in the midst of the siege. History has taught us that peace is something negotiated and made with our enemies. The time has come to choose restraint and to allow room for diplomacy before new actions further exacerbate the crisis. Panama reiterates that there is no military solution, only a comprehensive, just and lasting political process based on international law and on the relevant resolutions of the United Nations, as well as on the principle of two states and their peoples living in peace and security, will be able to guarantee the stability of the region and the safety and security of all. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I thank you for convening this emergency meeting of the Security Council. And I also thank Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for our briefing. Although in very difficult circumstances, I welcome to the Council His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jassim Al-Thani, Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar, and express not only the full solidarity of Sierra Leone, but also our commendation for Qatar's valuable global mediation efforts in conflict situations, particularly in the Middle East as well as in Africa. I also welcome to the Council His Excellency Mr. Ayman Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Expatriate of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Sierra Leone notes the letter dated 9 September 2025 from the Permanent Representative of the State of Qatar, transmitted as document S/2025/563, which draws the Council's attention to the grave incident that has prompted our deliberations. Sierra Leone has consistently upheld the conviction that the Middle East conflict, and in particular the Palestine question, must be resolved through peaceful means in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations. Article 2, Paragraph 3 oblige all member states to settle their disputes by negotiations, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, or other peaceful means while refraining from the threat or use of force, not to endanger international peace and security. It is in this light that Sierra Leone is deeply alarmed by the admission by the Prime Minister of the State of Israel of his government attack on Doha, the capital of Qatar, a state playing an active role as a mediator between Israel and Hamas in the ongoing escalation of the conflict in Gaza. Qatar's facilitation of dialogue has been indispensable to sustaining fragile ceasefire arrangements and preventing further escalation in Gaza. An assault on the territory of a mediator is not only a violation of its sovereignty, but also a direct strike at the very architecture of diplomacy. As the UN Secretary General has rightly stressed, all parties should be working towards a permanent ceasefire, not undermining it. Sierra Leone is gravely alarmed by this flagrant breach of international law. We strongly condemn Israel's attack in Doha, and we support the press statement just agreed by the Council members, which emphasizes the vital role that Qatar continues to play in mediation efforts in the region, alongside Egypt and the United States. We take note of the communication from the Gulf Cooperation Council member states, which described the strike, and I quote, as serious threats to the security and safety of Qataris and residents. Such actions constitute a grave breach of Article 2.4 of the Charter, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Sovereignty and territorial integrity are cornerstones of our collective security system. As we strongly condemn the Doha attack by the State of Israel, we commend the restraint demonstrated by the State of Qatar. Sierra Leone calls for the continuation of the exercise of maximum restraint, the peaceful resolution of dispute, and full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the State of Qatar, in compliance with international law, the Charter of the United Nations, and provisions of relevant Security Council resolutions. States with influence must leverage such influence for de-escalation and peace in the region. Mr. President, beyond the violation of sovereignty, Sierra Leone is gravely disturbed by reports of targeted assassinations of individuals who should be considered protected persons under international law, particularly international humanitarian law. Equally troubling are reports of such assassinations in residential areas. The Geneva Conventions, particularly the Fourth Convention, and their additional protocols, clearly prohibit violence against civilians and all persons not taking a direct part in hostilities. The Geneva Conventions explicitly forbid violence to life and person, in particular murder of all kinds against those not taking active part in hostilities. Mediators, negotiators, medical personnel, journalists, humanitarian staff, and civilians remain under the protection of international law. Willful killing of such persons constitutes a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions and a war crime. We are appalled by the deliberate targeting of civilians and mediators under safe conduct, acts that undermine the distinction between combatant and non-combatant, including those not taking part in hostilities, with no continuous combat function, and outside areas of hostilities. We must be clear. International law does not recognize revenge. International law recognizes only lawful self-defense on the use of force against imminent unlawful attack or collective action authorized by the Security Council. Acts motivated by revenge, retaliation are illegal. No justification can excuse deliberate attacks on those who are not engaged in active combat functions. Colleagues, these developments point to a larger challenge confronting the international community: the persistence of impunity in the face of serious violation of the UN Charter and international law. When such acts are met with silence or selective responses, perpetrators are emboldened to continue, eroding the credibility and weakening the rules-based international legal order. For the Council, failure to respond risks reducing this body to a bystander in the very crises it is mandated to address, and would amount to a referendum on the system we've built. Sierra Leone therefore urges this Council to affirm unequivocally the inviolability of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar and all member states to ensure that unlawful assassinations of protected persons are thoroughly investigated, to hold perpetrators accountable under international law, and to redouble efforts to bring the current conflict to an end through genuine good faith negotiations leading to a just and lasting peace. Mr. President, as we speak to the violations of the sovereignty of the State of Qatar, in the State of Palestine, in both the West Bank and Gaza, the inhumanity continues with ongoing hostilities. We remain gravely concerned about the humanitarian catastrophe in the Gaza Strip, with the declared famine, bombardment, and evacuation orders in Gaza City, mass displacement, act and rhetoric evincing genocidal intent. We are equally gravely concerned about the plight of hostages and recall with condemnation the 8 September attack on Israeli civilians at a Jerusalem bus stop, in which 6 people were killed and 8 others wounded. Violence on either side will only breed more violence, deepen suffering, and erode prospect for peace. We reiterate the imperative for an immediate ceasefire, the safe and unimpeded delivery of humanitarian aid, and the release of all hostages. The Council must demand a ceasefire, particularly when a mediator state has been so flagrantly attacked. The peoples of the Middle East, and indeed the peoples of the world, look to this Council for leadership, consistency, and resolve. Upholding the Charter is not optional. It is a binding obligation. Sovereignty must be respected, civilians and other protected persons must be safeguarded, and international law must be enforced without fear or favor. Only by doing so can we end impunity, restore confidence in the rules-based international legal order, and open the path to peace. As the Irish poet William Butler Yeats won in The Second Coming, immortalized in Things Fall Apart by the Nigerian author Chinua Achebe, and I quote, "Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loose upon the wall," end of quote. The United Nations is the center of the post-1945 multilateral rules-based system, and the Security Council its nucleus for peace and security. We must therefore act now with unity and determination. Anything less will betray our collective responsibility and the trust that the peoples of the world have placed in us. The system, as we know it, risks falling apart, and anarchy would indeed be loose upon the world. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for convening this briefing with the requisite urgency. I welcome the participation of His Excellency the Prime Minister of Qatar and His Excellency the Deputy Prime Minister of Jordan in today's meeting. I also thank the delegations of Algeria, Pakistan, and Somalia for requesting the meeting, and express appreciation to Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for the important information provided regarding Israel's military strike on Doha this Tuesday. Mr. President, Guyana condemns this violent act by Israel, which is a flagrant violation of international law and a direct and unprovoked assault on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the State of Qatar. We noted the destruction caused by the attack and that a Qatari national was killed. We express our full solidarity with the Emir and people of the State of Qatar. Mr. President, international law is under threat, and the Middle East region has unfortunately been the theater of too many frequent and serious violations of international law. Syria, Iran, Yemen, Lebanon, and now Qatar have all suffered violations of their sovereignty and territorial integrity by Israel, following unilateral decisions by the latter to militarily strike these countries. Just yesterday, we received reports of Israel's attack on Yemen involving strikes on civilian and residential facilities and the killing of several persons. Guyana reiterates its strong condemnation of these violations of international law
and calls for full accountability for these crimes. The culture of impunity must not be allowed to take root, and this is precisely what is happening in the face of the Council's inability to respond decisively to these breaches of the peace and acts of aggression. Israel's protracted war in Gaza and its unlawful occupation of Palestinian territory remain at the center of the instability in the Middle East. Ending the war in Gaza and resolving the question of Palestine are therefore urgent priorities that the Council must advance pursuant to its responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. We further stress that the efforts of mediators to end the war in Gaza and to secure the release of the remaining hostages are seriously undermined and complicated by actions such as those taken by Israel on Tuesday. The success of the mediation efforts depend on the good faith engagement of all parties. The bombing of representatives of one party in the territory of one of the mediators risks setting back peace efforts. Israel's actions also belie its stated commitment to bring the hostages home. The state of Qatar has been a consistent ally in fighting terrorism and has been instrumental in the mediation efforts alongside the United States and Egypt to bring about a diplomatic solution to the war in Gaza and to secure the release of hostages still held there. Israel's recent actions do not in any way help these efforts. In the context of the foregoing, Guyana makes the following 4 appeals. First, the state of Qatar must be redressed for the unlawful act committed against it by Israel. The international order is premised on the rule of law, and states cannot simply contravene international law and the UN Charter in pursuit of unilateral objectives. Repeated violations of international law, if consistently met with no firm response from international organs such as the United Nations Security Council, risk engendering chaos and instability. Second, Israel's brutal war on Gaza must end immediately, unconditionally, and permanently. The catastrophic and man-made suffering to which civilians are subjected, and which has now escalated to famine, is a daily and painful reminder of how much this war continues to cost Palestinian civilians. Guyana urges the Security Council to take appropriate and urgent action in keeping with its responsibility to protect Palestinian civilians. Third, Guyana appeals to Israel to cease its warmongering in the already volatile Middle East. Too many fires have been ignited in the region, presenting serious risks to international peace and security. Israel must abide scrupulously with its obligations under international law. Fourth and final, Mr. President, we need strong political will to resolve the question of Palestine in a just, peaceful, and comprehensive manner. 8 decades is too protracted a period to have an entire nation living in a state of flux, marked by recurrent cycles of violence and oppression. This goes against all the values of the United Nations. Until we settle the Palestinian question, our work will not be truly comprehensive in reach. We urge all Council members and the wider membership of the United Nations to resolve that the 80th year of our organization would be the year in which we take strong and positive actions for the Palestinian people in their just struggle for peace and self-determination. Guyana resolves to doing its part to this end. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Thank you, Mr. President. First and foremost, I wish to thank the Undersecretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Madam Rosemary DiCarlo, for the briefing, which establishes the facts in an elucidating way. I welcome the presence among us of His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman bin Jasmin Al-Thani, Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Qatar, as well as His Excellency Mr. Ayman Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Jordan, and His Excellency Mr. Anwar Gargash, Diplomatic Advisor to the President of the UAE. I also welcome the representative of Israel, of Turkey, of Iraq, of Kuwait, and of Egypt. Mr. President, thank you for having convened this emergency meeting, which has been supported by France. As was clearly expressed by the President of the French Republic, the strikes claimed by the State of Israel, which struck Qatari soil on 9 September 2025, are unacceptable, regardless of the motivation. There is an important need for the Security Council to condemn them. France reaffirms its commitment to respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar in accordance with the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. We extend our full solidarity with the Emir, to the Emir of Qatar, His Highness Excellency Sheikh Mohammed Al-Thani, as well as the Qatari people. The President of the Republic of France yesterday extended to the Emir of Qatar our full support. These strikes represent a grave violation of international law. Let us recall that the use of force throughout and at all times is strictly regulated by the Charter of the United Nations. These strikes generate a grave risk to regional stability, which has already been imperiled by an alarming escalation of tensions in Lebanon, in Syria, and the entire region. It is in the interest of all parties, including Israel, to avoid a new cycle of violence with devastating consequences for the entire region. Therefore, we call upon all parties to exercise utmost restraint. These strikes, lastly, targeted the very area where critical talks are being held for peace in Gaza and targeted those who were conducting the talks to achieve a ceasefire and the release of all hostages who are still being held by Hamas in Gaza. This needs to remain our paramount priority. Once again, France reiterates our unequivocal condemnation of the heinous crimes of Hamas, a terrorist movement, and the linchpin, and we call upon the movement to release the hostages and to renounce violence. The permanent state of war in Gaza cannot continue. France calls upon all parties to remain engaged in good faith to return in good faith negotiations to end this war in Gaza. To that end, we welcome the tireless efforts of Qatar, which alongside Egypt and the United States has been engaged in critical mediation efforts, and we are very much grateful to Qatar, a key mediator, and we call upon them to continue mediation to that end. Mr. President, there is an alternative to the cycle of violence. That is a political solution rooted in the two-state solution. This is the only way to achieve a lasting peace and security for the Israelis and for the Palestinians, as well as for the entire region. This solution hinges on the recognition of a sovereign Palestinian state with renewed and reformed governance. This solution hinges on the disarmament of Hamas, its exclusion for the future governance of Hamas, governance of Gaza, and the deployment of an international stabilization mission in the Strip. And this solution hinges on Israel's regional integration and the ultimate establishment and construction of a robust security architecture for the entire region. We will remain mobilized to achieve a two-state solution, as was the case during the conference in New York, co-chaired by Saudi Arabia in July. The New York Declaration, the outcome of the work of the conference, sets out a unique roadmap to make the two-state solution a reality. This conference, which will undertake its next step on the 22nd of September during the high-level week of the General Assembly, generates unprecedented political momentum for peace and security for all in the region. This is a path towards peace. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. I thank Algeria, Pakistan, and Somalia for their initiative in organizing this meeting, and I welcome the presence of His Excellency Mohammed, Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Qatar, and His Excellency Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Jordan, His Excellency Mr. Gargash, Diplomatic Advisor to the President of the UAE, and thank USG DiCarlo for her briefing. On September the 9th, Israel launched an attack on Doha, the capital of Qatar, in flagrant violation of Qatar's territorial sovereignty and national security, international law, and the UN Charter, and efforts to achieve peace. China resolutely opposes this and strongly condemns such an act. It is well known that Qatar, as an important mediator in the ceasefire negotiations, has made great efforts to promote the ceasefire and restore peace in Gaza, which has been highly appreciated by the international community. We note that on September 7th, the U.S. put forward a new ceasefire proposal and claimed that Israel had agreed to it. However, just 2 days later, a Hamas delegation which was discussing the ceasefire proposal was attacked by Israel. Such an act of bad faith, irresponsibility, and the deliberate sabotage of the negotiations is indeed despicable. China is deeply concerned that the attack could lead to further escalation of tensions in the region. We must point out that this incident is closely related to the long-standing differing positions of some non-regional countries regarding the Middle East issue. We would like to advise these major countries, in the interest of regional peace and stability, to take a fair and responsible stance to play a constructive role along with the international community in promoting a ceasefire and cessation of hostilities and in easing tensions in the region. I would like to reiterate that military means and the indiscriminate use of force are not the way out of this problem, and that an immediate ceasefire is the right way to save lives and bring the hostages home. China strongly calls on all parties concerned, in particular Israel, to work harder to ease the fighting and resume negotiations, rather than the opposite. Israel must immediately cease all military operations in Gaza, fulfill its obligations under international humanitarian law as an occupying power, fully restore humanitarian access and support the relief operations of the UN and other humanitarian agencies. President, the Gaza conflict has been going on for almost 2 years, resulting in a humanitarian catastrophe that is appalling and unprecedented in nature. During this period, we have witnessed over and over again the violation of international law and the undermining of the basic norms of international relations. The world cannot return to the law of the jungle, and the Middle East cannot remain in a state of perpetual war. As the primary organ for the maintenance of international peace and security, the Security Council has the responsibility to safeguard international order and the rule of law, and to promote regional peace and stability. The Council is now discussing a draft resolution on the humanitarian issue of Gaza. China supports Council's immediate action to end the fighting in Gaza and to ease the humanitarian catastrophe, and calls on the Council members and the international community to make joint efforts to this end. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as representative of the Republic of Korea. I also thank USG Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing. It is deeply troubling that another unacceptable incident happened amid the ongoing instability and tensions in the region. The Security Council's press statement released today clearly exemplifies the collective voice of the international community. The Israeli attacks targeting Qatari soil on Tuesday represent yet another grave violation of international law. One of the core principles under the UN Charter is clear: sovereignty and territorial integrity must be respected in international relations. The Republic of Korea is appalled that the attacks allegedly targeting Hamas leadership, yet also killing a member of the Qatar Internal Security Forces, happened in a residential area of Doha. The the capital of the key mediating country, Qatar. Therefore, the Republic of Korea calls for the full respect of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of every country, as well as immediate de-escalation in the region. International law can't be selective. It must be strictly observed by all states. More regional instability helps no one in the region at this vital juncture. Also unacceptable is that these attacks are hampering ongoing negotiations to secure an immediate ceasefire and release of all hostages brutally held by Hamas. And the attacks were committed just a few days after a new ceasefire proposal has been put forward. Hamas committed atrocious terrorist attacks against Israeli civilians, which we continue to condemn in the strongest terms. However, Tuesday's Doha attacks directly targeting its negotiation team does not help advance the talks, which stand at an inflection point. We reaffirm our full support for the efforts by the US, Qatar, and Egypt, and the unwavering commitment of Qatar for its diplomatic mediation undertakings, as reflected in the recent remarks by its Prime Minister. The instance was also grievous, as it may have significant negative impact on common efforts by the international community to ease the extreme humanitarian suffering of Palestinian civilians, as well as Israeli hostages held in Gaza. The international community, including members of this Council, are seeking measures, either multilaterally or bilaterally, to expand the desperately needed humanitarian aid to those civilians in Gaza. It is lamentable that the government of Israel chose to pursue another act of hostility, rather than actively participating as a direct party to conflict in global humanitarian efforts to halt the famine. Colleagues, we all know the best solution to restore stability in the region: an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the release of all remaining 48 hostages, as well as an urgent surge of humanitarian aid in Gaza, are all crucial for underpinning peace and stability in the region. Upon yet another dangerous escalation in the region, we now hear once again the desperate voice of the long-suffering hostage families pleading for the finalization of the deal. We must listen. The war in Gaza must end now. All hostages must be released. Civilians must be protected, and international law must be respected under any circumstances. We must chart a new path toward regional de-escalation and peace. I shall now make a statement. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al-Thani, Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the State of Qatar.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, may the peace, blessings, and mercy of God be upon you. Mr. President, allow me to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Council this month. We thank you for quickly responding to our request to convene this meeting. We especially like to thank Algeria, Pakistan, Somalia, the UK, and France that asked for holding this meeting on our behalf. We also thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, for her briefing. We thank the Council members for adopting the press release today. We appreciate your solidarity with Qatar that we heard in your statements after the unjust Israeli attack on Doha that the press statement has condemned. The attack occurred on the soil of a main mediator. The statement stressed
the commitment to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar in line with the principles of the United Nations. We address the Security Council today in light of a dangerous escalation which constitutes a threat to international peace and security and regional peace and security. This is why it is at the core of the mandate of the Security Council as per the Charter. The Israeli attack, an unjust attack, at 3:45 on Tuesday, the 9th of September 2025, targeted a residential area allocated by the state to the negotiating teams. This is part of our ongoing negotiation efforts. These residencies house the negotiating team of Hamas and their families. The residential areas are known to all those who are engaged in negotiations, even diplomats and journalists that have held meetings with the negotiating team knows where these residencies are. We take measures to verify what happened, and it turns out that the casualties included Arif Bado, Saad Mohammed Al-Dosi, who was 22 years old. He was martyred on duty. A number of civilians were also injured, and members of internal security forces working in the compound, they're receiving now medical treatment. We are trying to identify the identity of those affected. It was a residential area, and the attacks terrorized those who lived there. This area houses schools and houses different diplomatic residencies. The attack is a violation of the sovereignty of a state member of the United Nations. This attack is far away of the civilized behavior by states that believe in peace. Qatar is making tireless efforts to save lives, and this attack puts the international community before a test. Israel, led by extremists, bloodthirsty extremists, have gone beyond any borders, any limitations when it comes to behavior, not only among states, but among individuals. We're unable to predict what Israel can do. How can we host Israeli representatives when they have commit this attack? Have you heard of any state that is attacking a mediator this way? A state that is attacking negotiating teams that are hosted by Qatar, and then the Prime Minister is using shameful justifications and is trying to justify this attack that is condemned by the whole world. The Prime Minister should have recall the model of Taliban. They had a political bureau in Doha, and we had a negotiation channel or a communication channel, and this channel led to reaching an agreement on Afghanistan that led to the end of the war after decades. The U.S. have never targeted the negotiators over these years. On the contrary, the world has seen the success of these efforts in cooperation with the United States under the leadership of Donald Trump to end the longest war in the history of the United States in 2020. This is the approach we pursue. This is the approach that the Prime Minister of Israel is trying to distort. These continued violations of international law, this behavior that undermine all values, prove only one thing, that the current leaders of Israel are arrogant, and they believe that they enjoy impunity. In addition to the genocide in Gaza and the unprecedented humanitarian disaster in the Strip, and the international community has not acted yet, here we are. We can see that Israel is undermining the stability of the region impetuously. Israel is trying to rearrange the region by force. It is using fundamentalist ideas. That is the basis of Israel's behaviors. Israel leaders are declaring that. And they think that only the Israeli population is listening to them, but we're all listening to them. The peoples of the region are not accepting this kind of behavior, are not accepting this narrative. We believe fully in mediation and the peaceful settlement of disputes, and Qatar's role is being appreciated worldwide. Our efforts has proven that our efforts in cooperation with the United States and Egypt has led tangible results. It led to the release of 148 hostages. It has led to providing humanitarian aid to Gaza. It was a glimmer of hope, a rare glimmer of hope in this Gaza. But attacking our territories while we were busy with negotiations has uncovered the intention of Israel. It is trying to undermine any prospect of peace. It is trying to perpetuate the suffering of the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people is subjected to unimaginable suffering. It also shows that extremists that rule Israel today do not care about the hostages. This is not a priority. Otherwise, how would we justify the timing of this attack? Because the negotiations were looking at the latest U.S. proposal. The negotiating team of Hamas have been getting together to discuss the U.S. proposal, and the attack occurred. Mr. President, I stand before you today and I urge your august council to bear its historic responsibility. Silence before the law of the jungle and targeting a sovereign country this way undermines international efforts, undermines the prospects of any peace process in our region. The continuation of such attacks does not only target Qatar, it is a clear threat to target any country that is working on achieving peace, and that undermines the trust in the United Nations. The state of Qatar stresses, under the leadership of its emir, may God protect him, that we will continue our humanitarian and diplomatic role without any hesitation in order to stop the bloodshed. At the same time, we will not condone any attack on our sovereignty. We will reserve the right to respond through tools guaranteed by international law. We call for peace, not war. Peace is our approach, and we will not be deterred by those who call for war and destruction. Before your Security Council, we present these facts, and we recall that today we're discussing an attack on all diplomatic efforts to reach peaceful solution. The only way to peace goes through negotiations, and it starts with a ceasefire and the release of all detainees and hostages, and ensuring the unconditional entry of humanitarian aid, and lifting the blockades. Allow me, on behalf of all peace-loving peoples around the world, I would like to be optimistic. We cannot succumb to extremists. We have to continue to pursue peace through the two-state solution, through the establishment of the independent Palestinian state, fully sovereign on Palestinian national soil, according to international resolutions. We need two states, two peoples living side by side in peace. This will only be achieved through the adherence of the principles of international law. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Sheikh Al-Thani for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Mr. President, on September 9th, Israel carried out a precise and targeted strike in Doha. The strike targeted Hamas leaders who for years have planned and directed attacks against Israel, many times making these directives from the luxury confines in Doha. These terrorists were the sole target of the operation. The men targeted were not legitimate politicians, diplomats, or representatives. They were the masterminds of terror. They orchestrated the massacre on October 7th, murdering civilians, kidnapping children, raping women, wiping out entire communities. As the smoke still rose from the massacre, even as the attack was still unfolding, Hamas leaders in Qatar appeared live on television, proudly broadcasting their celebration. While Israelis hid in safe rooms, fled from gunfire, and endured murder, kidnapping, and rape, Hamas's leaders feasted and congratulated themselves in real time. These are the same men who called for jihad to escalate the conflict. They called for blood, not peace. They wild terror, not negotiation. And the terror has not stopped. Just days ago, at Ramot Junction in Jerusalem, Hamas terrorists opened fire on a bus stop crowded with children and adults. 6 innocent people were murdered, among them a 25-year-old who had immigrated from Spain, recently married and building his future in Israel, a rabbi who had dedicated his life to teaching the next generation, 2 residents of the community struck down in their own neighborhood. Among the wounded was a woman 8 months pregnant, left to fight for her life and the life of her unborn child. These are not numbers. They are lives, families, futures stolen. When the gunfire stopped, the bus and the pavement around it were drenched in blood. This is what terrorism looks like. Mothers clutching babies, a bus stop turned into a battlefield, a community scared in seconds. This is a reality we face in Israel. Terror raising its ugly head almost every single day. And let this council be reminded, there can be no immunity for terrorists. Hamas immediately praised the killers as heroic and exceptional, later claiming full responsibility for the attack and calling the massacre of innocent people a natural response. There is nothing natural about this. It is terror, pure and simple. Today, 48 innocent people are still held hostage by Hamas. Their families live in daily pain. It has been more than 700 days that innocent people have been trapped in Hamas captivity. 700 days of cruelty and abuse. Hamas has used them as bargaining chips, turning their suffering into currency. But let me be clear, there is no immunity for terrorists. Not for those who commit it, and not for those who enable it. Israel has agreed to President Trump's ceasefire proposal. We are ready to stop the fighting, but Hamas refuses. They keep the world waiting. They are in no rush. They have the time. Indifferent to the human suffering that their delay causes. And who suffers from this refusal? Not the leaders of Hamas, living abroad in the Ritz-Carlton in Doha. They don't suffer, they have the time. But the hostages languishing in their cells and the people of Gaza used as human shields. From the start, Hamas's strategy has been to embed its weapons among civilians. They hide rockets in schools, command centers in hospitals, and tunnels under homes. They put their own people in harm's way, then cry crocodile tears when civilians are hurt. Our fight is with Hamas, not with the people of Gaza, not with the state of Qatar. Israel will continue to take precautions to protect innocent lives. That is the difference between us and those who glorify massacre and terror. Like in the Bible, like Cain in the Bible, who was marked for the murder of his brother, so too are Hamas's leaders marked for their crimes. It doesn't matter where they hide, whether in the tunnel in Gaza or in a luxury hotel abroad. The mark of Cain is upon them. For too long, Hamas leaders have been sheltered not only in Doha, but in Beirut, Tehran, and elsewhere, parading as politicians and statesmen while acting as terrorists. They are treated like celebrities, when in reality, they are commanders of massacre and barbarism. This false disguise of legitimacy gave them freedom to move, to buy weapons, to recruit through so-called humanitarian networks, and to spread propaganda on international platforms that should have rejected them. This strike sends a message that should echo across this chamber. There is no sanctuary for terrorists, not in Gaza, not in Tehran, not in Doha. There is no immunity for terrorists. And yet, here in this Council, some members chose to give Hamas legitimacy, even protection. Israel will not. We will act against the leaders of terror wherever they are hiding. Mr. President, we have heard today in this Council allegations about a breach of the territorial sovereignty of Qatar. But one must ask, where were these concerns when sovereignty was violated by terror itself? On October 8, when Hezbollah launched rockets across Israel's border, when Houthis fired a ballistic missile at Ben Gurion airport, or just days ago, when a Houthi drone crashed into the arrivals hall of Rabon airport, injuring civilians. How can anyone hide behind allegations appealing to the principles of international law while giving legitimacy to those who openly glorify October 7th and continue to plot terror? Mr. President, this brings me to Qatar. Prime Minister Al-Thani, the time for Qatar to choose has come. For too long, Qatar has harbored terrorists, offering Hamas leaders sanctuary in luxury hotels while they orchestrate massacres and terror attacks. History will not be kind to accomplices. Either Qatar condemns Hamas, expels Hamas, and brings Hamas to justice, or Israel will. Mr. President, the world has faced moments like this before. Today, the world remembers the devastating terrorist attacks of September 11th. That tragic day, like October 7th for Israel, was a day of fire and blood. In the aftermath of 9/11, the countries that uphold freedom, equality, and democracy in this Council stood shoulder to shoulder. 2 weeks later, this Council adopted Resolution 1373. It said plainly, no state may harbor terrorists. No state may fund them. No state may give them safe haven. I urge you all to read this resolution. Any government that does so breaks this Council binding obligations. That principle was clear then. It must be upheld today. And when bin Laden was eliminated in Pakistan, the question asked was not, why target a terrorist on foreign soil? No one asked that question. The question was, why was a terrorist given shelter at all? The same question must be asked today. There was no immunity for bin Laden, and there can be no immunity for Hamas. And in facing terror, history shows that members of this Council have done the very same. From 2014 to 2022, France struck terrorists in Mali, Chad, Burkina Faso, and Mauritania. In 2014 and 2015, the United Kingdom carried out airstrikes in Iraq and Syria against ISIS. So I ask, if these actions were justified then, why is Israel singled out now? Why are claims concerning sovereignty invoked only against Israel and ignored when others act to defend themselves? Is Israeli blood worth less? The question to ask is not why Israel targets the mastermind of terror, but why they are sheltered abroad, while hostages starve in captivity and Gazans are left to suffer. Israel's fight is not only Israel's. It is a fight of all who believe in democracy against those who worship death and violence, light against darkness, civilization against barbarism, justice against terror. We will continue until the hostages are free, until our people are safe, and until terror can no longer find sanctuary in any corner of the world, because there is no, and there never will be, immunity for terrorists. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Israel for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ayman Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs in the Inspectorate of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, Mr. President, I congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Council, and I thank Under-Secretary General De Carlo for her briefing. Esteemed colleagues, a rogue government soaked in the blood of innocent people, imbued with extremism and hatred, does not care about international law, is not deterred by human values, considers itself above the law, uses brutality to impose a racist ideology and to achieve expansionist goals that threatens peace and security in the region and the world. This is the reality of the Israeli government. The international community must act immediately and effectively to curb its arrogance and to protect the whole region from its disastrous actions. Over the past 23 months, Israel has killed more than 65,000 Palestinians in Gaza. It claimed the lives of 540 humanitarian workers and 247 journalists. It has used starvation as a weapon. The famine that it created in Gaza killed 411 Palestinians, including 142 children. Israel turned Gaza into a land where any sign of life is obliterated, any human values are obliterated. Killing has become promotional material for occupation soldiers. Killing more than 100 Palestinians daily has become an ordinary occurrence. This government is using any and all means to increase escalation, to increase violence, to deepen the conflict and to push towards chaos. It continues to commit genocide in Gaza. More than 1 million Palestinians in Gaza City are faced with the threat of being killed or dying of starvation or being forcibly displaced to camps where Israel has destroyed the lives of those who are forced to go to those camps, camps in wastelands, lacking all basic necessities of life. And Israel is preventing the delivery of humanitarian and medical aid to these camps. It prevents the delivery of baby formula, bread, and water. Israel is expanding its illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. It is protecting terrorist settlers that are launching 4 terrorist attacks daily on Palestinians. It is seizing more Palestinian land. It is imposing a blockade on the Palestinian people and its legitimate leadership economically, and it's imposing a blockade on their lives. It is thereby killing all prospects of achieving just and durable peace. Today, just hours before this meeting, the Prime Minister of Israel says that he allowed for building new illegitimate settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. He boasted about preventing the establishment of a Palestinian state. He boasted about killing all prospect of peace and subjecting the peoples of the region, including the Israeli people, to more conflict and more wars. Israel is attacking the stability of Lebanon. It is occupying more Syrian territories. It is contriving sectarian strife to plunge Syria into chaos and conflict, in another flagrant violation of international law, in another dangerous escalation. Israel is violating the sovereignty of the brotherly state of Qatar. It is launching a cowardly attack against its capital, Qatar. It is shamelessly betraying a state that has been working tirelessly in partnership with the Arab Republic of Egypt and the United States of America to reach an exchange deal, to reach a permanent ceasefire, to end the suffering, and to allow for returning to diplomacy to achieve peace and security for all. We condemn this brutal and treacherous attack against Qatar. As King Ibn al-Hussein and the Crown Prince to the Emir of Qatar, Qatar stands unequivocally with Qatar in any steps it takes to protect the security, sovereignty, and safety of its citizens. Our security is Qatar's security. The stability of Qatar is the stability of the region. We are united by one vision. And the choice of Qatar is our choice, and it's a clear choice. Our choice and our vision is a secure and stable Middle East, where just, durable, and comprehensive peace prevails. A Middle East that realizes the right of the Palestinian people to life, freedom, and statehood. A Middle East that that guarantees the security of the Israelis and the Palestinians and all peoples of the region. A Middle East where cooperation replaces conflict and hope replaces despair. The Israeli government and its extremists are lying when they're trying to justify their betrayal of Qatar after all the efforts it has been making to reach an exchange deal and to end the war. They're lying when they claim that they're surrounded by those who wish to destroy them. All Arab countries are committed to achieving just and durable peace that ensures the security of Israel, ensures that it has normal relations with the countries of the region in the context of implementing the two-state solution that ends the occupation and that establishes an independent, sovereign Palestinian state on national Palestinian soil along the lines of the 4th of June 1967, in line with international resolutions, living in peace and security side by side with Israel. Israel has yet to engage positively with the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, the declaration of the Conference on the Two-State Solutions that was organized by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the French Republic last July, which was attended by 125 states, confirmed unequivocally that we choose the just peace. The meeting that will be held here in the United Nations as a follow-up to this conference offers an opportunity to all states to support peace efforts by recognizing the Palestinian state and by supporting the two-state solution as the only way to achieve peace. We want just peace. But the reality is that there is no Israeli partner now to work with to achieve said peace. Esteemed colleagues, your august Council holds the responsibility of protecting peace and security, and it has the tools. Use those tools, apply international law and the Charter of the United Nations, which form the basis of your legitimacy. Use those tools to ensure the acceptance of the exchange deal that Qatar, Egypt, and the United States have been working on. To use these tools to stop the aggression on Gaza, to end the starvation, to enforce the entry of humanitarian aid, to protect what is left of the credibility of international law and international humanitarian law, to restore the belief that human values and international law exist to be applied without discrimination, without selectivity, to reaffirm that no aggressor should be granted immunity and that there is no state above the law, to revive the hope that conflict is not the fate of the region and that peace is possible and it's our common goal and we can achieve this goal if the necessary will is demonstrated. Ladies and gentlemen, the message that Israel has sent through its attack on Qatar is that it will persist with its aggression. It will persist with violating the sovereignty of states. It will persist with violating international law. It will persist with killing civilians and innocent people. It will persist in imposing a famine on Gaza. It will persist in preventing 6,000 students in Gaza from the right to education because it is enjoying immunity. It is evading accountability for all these crimes. Esteemed colleagues, injustice has reached unconscionable levels. Stop it. Stop this injustice before it's too late. Thank you, and may the peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Safadi for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Anwar Gargash, Diplomatic Advisor to the President of the United Arab Emirates.
Mr. President, I would like to begin by thanking the Republic of Korea for promptly convening this emergency session. I'd also like to thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo for her comprehensive briefing. The United Arab Emirates endorses the statement that Kuwait will deliver on behalf of the Gulf Cooperation Council, along with statements from the Arab and OIC groups. The high-level participation in this session clearly underscores the gravity with which we view this Israeli aggression against the state of Qatar. Mr. President, the UAE has condemned in the strongest terms the blatant Israeli attack against the state of Qatar, which represents a flagrant violation of Qatar's sovereignty and the Gulf state's security. It is a serious assault on international law, including the UN Charter, and it is an irresponsible escalation that threatens regional stability and international peace and security. Yesterday, the President of the UAE, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, visited Doha. He reaffirmed our complete solidarity with Qatar, its leadership and people, and our firm support for all measures that Qatar takes to protect its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the safety of its people. Mr. President, the Security Council's continued failure to act decisively against repeated Israeli violations of fundamental principles of the UN Charter will undoubtedly have severe consequences for regional and international peace. This unprecedented attack against Qatar also seriously undermines prospects for peace and ending the war in Gaza. Qatar, together with Egypt and the United States, has played a leading role in efforts to secure a ceasefire, to release the hostages and detainees and return them to their loved ones, and to resume unhindered humanitarian aid at scale. These reckless, belligerent actions will deliver neither Israel nor the region our shared goal for peace, prosperity, security, and stability. They only serve to fuel more violence, extremism, and chaos, precisely when the region desperately needs restraint and de-escalation. Furthermore, the relentless threats of land annexation and attacks on neighboring countries destroys any foundation for lasting peace and threatens the entire region's stability. Mr. President, we must work together toward a better future for the people of our region, one built in justice, coexistence, shared prosperity, and good neighborly relations, free from extremist ideologies of any kind. As we all strive for a just and lasting peace in the region, the attacks on the state of Qatar further inflames an already explosive situation. And with our gathering today, we reaffirm the centrality of international law and the sovereignty of states, as well as the wisdom required of all of us to achieve peace and security. Today, Mr. President, Qatar does not stand alone. The Council spoke with one voice to condemn aggression. Our collective voice should make a difference against these unlawful acts of transgression against international law. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Gagash for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Mr. President, I have the honor to deliver the following statement on behalf of the member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation in my capacity as chair of the group. Mr. President, let me express our appreciation to you for prompt convening of this meeting following the Israeli attack, which targeted the residential headquarters of members of the political bureau of Hamas in Doha, State of Qatar, on Tuesday, 9 September, resulting in death of several persons, including a Qatari or more Qatari citizens, while leaving many others injured in the residential area. The OIC group condemns in its strongest terms this despicable and unwarranted attack against the State of Qatar in flagrant violation of its territorial sovereignty and national security. There is no doubt that this dastardly action constitutes a blatant violation of the norms of international law and certainly the Charter of the United Nations, much as it represents an overt threat to both the security of the Middle East region and indeed international peace and security. Indeed, this attack represents state terrorism and is part of a pattern of systematic policies and ongoing efforts by Israel to destabilize the region. We express our full solidarity with the State of Qatar during this critical period, while we stand united in support of the right and duty of the State of Qatar to respond decisively to any reckless breach or aggression that threatens its security and jeopardizes regional stability. We also support Qatar as it takes necessary measures to protect its citizens and defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, including political, diplomatic, and legal measures. We commend the tireless and sincere efforts made by the State of Qatar under the leadership of His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al-Thani, Emir of the State of Qatar, in the areas of mediation, de-escalation, and peaceful resolution of disputes in the region and beyond. These efforts are crucial to maintaining international peace and security in accordance with the Charter of the UN. We appreciate the commitment of the State of Qatar to continue its steadfast and constructive approach of standing with its brothers and friends and in advocating for just humanitarian causes, thereby strengthening the foundations of international peace and security. In this regard, OIC Group calls on the United Nations Security Council to take firm measures in the face of this unjustified use of armed force against the sovereignty of Qatar, an act that constitutes an obvious threat to international peace and security. Accordingly, we call on the Council to hold Israel accountable for this act of aggression. OIC Group recognizes that this latest act of aggression against a peace-loving, mediating state in our region is yet another example of the impunity which has continued to characterize Israel's relations with the countries in the Middle East. It has become obvious that the absence of any deterrent measure by the United Nations, and especially this Council, has continued to embolden the Israeli authorities in its incessant violation of international law and the charter of this organization. We recall the unwavering position of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation pursuant to its charter, as well as its various summit and ministerial resolutions, which firmly reject any aggression against the sovereignty and security of any of its members. We call on the international community to strongly condemn this illegal attack against Qatar as a way of promoting, supporting and defending noble principles of peace and security within the global setting. I thank you again, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Turkey for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Iraq.
سيد رئيس المجلس.
Mr. President, I would like to seize this opportunity to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month. We also thank and express our gratitude to the Republic of Panama for assuming the presidency of the Security Council last month. We also express our deep appreciation for the efforts to convene this emergency session. Mr. President, the Middle East region is currently on a dangerous slope as a result of the reckless ongoing actions of the Israeli entity. And at a time when voices are rising, demands are growing for calm and de-escalation, for intensifying diplomatic efforts, and for ending the ongoing bombardment of the occupied Gaza Strip and the series of crimes committed there. Amidst all of this, the Israeli entity is once again deliberately trying to drag the region and the world onto a dangerous path by committing a blatant attack on Tuesday, September the 9th, 2025, targeting residential buildings where a number of members of Hamas political bureau reside in the Qatari capital, Doha. This attack resulted in the death of a number of people, including a Qatari citizen, in addition to a number of injuries. The attack took place in a residential area that includes also a school and houses. We reiterate that this attack constitutes a flagrant violation of all international laws and norms. It is a serious threat to the security and safety of citizens and residents of the state of Qatar. These repeated attacks by the Israeli entity are nothing but acts of aggression against the entire region and a flagrant threat to international peace and security. As such, we call upon the international community to shoulder its legal and moral obligations in the face of these attacks. We stress the need for firm and strict international positions, especially in the Security Council. This attack represents state terrorism and comes in the context of systematic policies and continuous attempts by the Israeli entity to destabilize security and stability in the region. It requires a policy of zero tolerance for such reckless behavior, this constant tampering with the security of the region, or the targeting of the security and sovereignty of states. Mr. President, the Arab group condemns in the strongest terms the Israeli attack on the Qatari capital, Doha, and the threat to the safety and security of its citizens, as well as the violation of the safety and sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Qatari state. We support the state of Qatar within the framework of its right and duty to act decisively against any reckless violation or aggression that undermines its security and threatens the stability of the region. We support Qatar in preserving its right to respond to this blatant attack and to take all necessary political, diplomatic and legal measures to protect its people and defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, including, as we said, political, diplomatic and legal measures. We commend the tireless and sincere efforts undertaken by the state of Qatar in the framework of mediation, de-escalation and the peaceful resolution of disputes in the region, within the framework of maintenance of international peace and security in accordance with the UN Charter. We value Qatar's affirmation that it will continue this constructive approach, standing with brothers and friends and supporting the just human causes in a manner that would safeguard and bolster international peace and security. The current phase also requires the redoubling of our efforts, and that our top priority should be to stop the targeting of civilians and save the regions from the evils of war. Mr. President, the foundations of protecting regional and international security, which are your responsibility, require us to stand today to stop these attacks immediately, to hold accountable those who threaten our security and stability, to hold the Israeli entity legally and politically responsible for these irrational and reckless acts, and take all measures to stop these violations and ensure their non-recurrence. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Iraq for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Kuwait.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God the Merciful, Mr. President, I have the honour of issuing this statement on behalf of the members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, namely UAE, the Kingdom of Bahrain, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Sultanate of Oman, the State of Qatar, and my country, the State of Kuwait. We congratulate you on acceding to the presidency of the Council this month. And we wish to convey to you our gratitude to Panama for the presidency of the Council last month. We also thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. Mr. President, today we are making this joint statement in order to reaffirm our unwavering solidarity of the Gulf with the brotherly nation of Qatar. We categorically reject any and all violations of its sovereignty, security, and its stability. We recall our collective position, which has remained unchanged, namely that the full responsibility for these heinous acts and their consequences falls on Israel's shoulders squarely. We will not tolerate any attack on the security of our countries or on the stability of our region. Mr. President, we condemn in the strongest possible terms Israel's criminal, cowardly and flagrant attack on Tuesday, the 9th of September of this year. That act of aggression constitutes a dangerous and direct escalation against a sovereign Arab state. It was an attack which targeted residential complexes that housed a number of members of the Hamas political bureau in Doha, Qatar. The attack claimed the lives of several people, including a Qatari citizen. Other people were wounded, and the attack occurred in a residential neighborhood which included a school and housing. We convey our condolences to our brothers in Qatar. This aggression is a flagrant violation of international laws and customs. It stands as a grave threat to the peace and security of the Qatari people and the residents of the state of Qatar. We here warn unambiguously regarding the consequences of continuing to violate state sovereignty. National security of states or the countries of the GCC is a red line for us, and similar acts will be met with collective actions, tougher in nature, and legal political measures as deterrents, according to what's agreed upon within international organizations. Mr. President, this aggression occurred as part of systematic policies and continued attempts on Israel's part to undermine regional security and stability. We cannot stand for this irresponsible Israeli behavior, this reckless Israeli behavior which imperils the region's security. We must not tolerate any action which targets our sovereignty and security. This hostile approach will be met with a united stance of the Gulf countries. There will be no compromises made on sovereignty or security. Mr. President, we reiterate that the state of Qatar has the right and duty to deal with any aggressions or violations which undermine or threaten stability in the region. It can do so in the strongest terms. Qatar has the right to respond to the heinous attack and to take all measures necessary to respond to it in order to protect its people, defend its sovereignty and its territorial integrity. This includes taking diplomatic, political and/or legal measures. We reiterate that this right is enshrined in the United Nations Charter. We recall that dealing resolutely and firmly with this aggression will act as a deterrent to those those tempted to undermine the security of a state. This aggression was not only against Qatar but against the region as a whole. The attack constitutes a flagrant threat to international peace and security. We consequently urge the international community as a whole to shoulder its legal and moral responsibilities in terms of these rogue attacks, and we urge the international community to hold the perpetrators accountable. In this connection, we insist that there is a need to adopt decisive, resolute measures as blocks and as regions. This applies also and particularly to the Security Council. The Council must adopt practical and immediate measures, including clear measures to deter any further acts of aggression, and the Council must lever all accountability tools to ensure that this flagrant aggression against the sovereignty of a state that plays a central role in de-escalation efforts does not occur again. Mr. President, we commend the sincere efforts of the State of Qatar under the leadership of Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al-Thani, Emir of Qatar. We commend their efforts to mediate, de-escalate and to resolve disputes through peaceful means in the region. They've also done this with a view to protecting international peace and security in accordance with the UN Charter. Attacking a loyal mediator torpedoes the chances of calm. It destabilizes the region and erodes the chance of peace. To conclude, Mr. President, the countries of the GCC will remain resolved to continue all efforts to promote international peace and security. We stand shoulder to shoulder with the State of Qatar, a brotherly state, and we call for this aggression to be referred to specialized international mechanisms. The international community must hold the attackers accountable immediately. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Kuwait for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Egypt.
Mr. President, Your Excellency, Mr. Abdulrahman Al-Thani, the Prime Minister of Qatar, Your Excellency, Mr. Ayman Al-Safadi, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Jordan, Mr. Anwar Gargash, Diplomatic Advisor to the President of the UAE. We gather today to discuss the aggression that was unacceptable against the state of Qatar, that was making tireless efforts alongside with Egypt and the U.S. to achieve ceasefire in Gaza Strip and achieve security and peace for the Palestinian and Israeli peoples alike. Israel's cooperation and appreciation of these efforts was a treacherous aggression on Qatari territory under unacceptable pretexts. Mr. President, Israel committed an aggression against an Arab country that was not the first of its kind and will not be the last since the beginning of the crisis in Gaza. It committed this aggression in light of a genocide committed against the Palestinian people that we must not overlook, and in light of the displacement of the Palestinian people and the occupation of their lands that must end. Unfortunately, Israel will continue this aggression and these crimes as long as the Security Council and the international community do not take serious measures to deter Israel from its policy of extreme aggression and its repeated violation of international law and the Charter of the UN. Mr. President, Egypt would like to highlight the following points. First, Egypt condemns in the strongest terms the blatant aggression against the state of Qatar, which targeted the political bureau of Hamas movement in a flagrant violation of the provisions of international law and the UN Charter. Egypt stresses its full solidarity and its position in support of the brotherly state of Qatar that made strenuous efforts that should be appreciated and praised by all to stop the war in Gaza and to achieve stabilization in the region. Egypt stresses that the international law and the UN Charter guarantee to Qatar and Arab countries that have been subjected to similar Israeli aggressions, it guarantees them all the options to address this aggression, which the Security Council should not stand by in its face. The Israeli aggression clearly reveals the party that is hindering the achievement of a ceasefire agreement, and the party that wishes to prolong the war for extremist political and religious goals aimed at displacing the Palestinian people and attempting to liquidate their cause, as well as for internal reasons that we all know. The aggression targeted Qatar, which is making tremendous efforts with Egypt to reach this agreement, and aimed at a meeting that was scheduled to discuss the latest offer to stop the war and proposals to do that, which of course will further cause difficulties and make it difficult to reach a solution within the negotiations. Third, this brutal attack clearly reflects the ideology of Israeli politics, which knows nothing but the language of killing, destruction and aggression, an ideology that does not distinguish between right and wrong and is even assaulting those who are helping it. And we wonder, how do mediation efforts succeed? How can they succeed in convincing all parties in the region of the feasibility of a peaceful solution while Israel is attacking the mediators who facilitate this solution, who are the mediators for it? Egypt stresses that the military option and the method of imposing solutions by force have not worked for Israel, as all fronts of the conflict are still burning and tensions prevail due to repeated Israeli aggressions. The wall of hatred is taking root again. In fact, the only breakthrough in this landscape was achieved only at the beginning of the year due to mediation efforts that succeeded in achieving a ceasefire that we had hoped will be sustained had it not been for Israel's desire to prolong the aggression. Fifth, Egypt calls for intensifying efforts to stop the Israeli war against Gaza Strip, which has claimed the lives of more than 64,000 martyrs. We call for saving Gaza Strip from a famine that is killing its population and stop the occupation practices in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. We remind you of that humanitarian catastrophe in Palestinian territories that is exacerbated by Israel's siege and crimes. We call upon the Council to immediately adopt a resolution under Chapter 7 that stops the Israeli aggression against Gaza and supports the efforts of the mediators. We reiterate that the Middle East will not witness or know peace or stability except through a just and comprehensive solution that achieves an independent Palestinian state on the June 4, 1967 borders with its capital, East Jerusalem. 6. Egypt underscores its continued adherence to peaceful solution to all crises in the region and its efforts to establish peace and end wars. Perhaps our latest endeavors has been manifested in the success of our efforts to mediate between the state of Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, and the signing of the Cairo Agreement yesterday to resume technical cooperation in an effort to achieve calm and restore trust between all parties and create an atmosphere that is conducive to regional security and stability. In this context, we stress our firm determination to save the defenseless Palestinian people from the ongoing aggression against their land, especially in the Gaza Strip, and to help in the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip under the full supervision of the Palestinian Authority. In conclusion, Mr. President, we reaffirm our position to stand firmly with our brothers in the state of Qatar and to support any measures Qatar takes in defense of its national security. We call upon the Council to immediately take a decisive decision to deter Israel and stop its war against the Gaza Strip and the countries of the region, and to confront the state terrorism by Israel before Israel sends the region into a regional war that no one can afford. The time has come for the international community to have a unified position that is firm against Israel and oblige Israel to abide by the international law, renounce violence, and embrace peace as a path. Qatar is not alone. Your Excellency, Sheikh Mohammed, Egypt and national security are all at stake, and thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Egypt for the statement. The representative of Pakistan has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am obliged to take the floor to respond to some comments. The representative of Israel perhaps did not listen attentively to all council members and other speakers in today's debate. And in our view, it is unacceptable, indeed ludicrous, for an aggressor, an occupier, a serial violator of UN Charter and international law, that is Israel, to abuse this chamber and disrespect the sanctity of this council. And this is not the first time. And by pointing fingers on others, baseless assertions primarily aimed at masking its own illegal actions and violations of international law. President, but that's not at all surprising. It is an occupier that does not listen to anyone, that does not pay heed to any advice, even from its friends, if there are any left, that refutes, and not just refutes, it threatens members of the international community, international media, international human rights and humanitarian organizations, doesn't listen to the ICJ or the ICC, and threatens the UN and its senior officials. And it does that with impunity, shielded by its apologists who time and again acquiesce in its illegal actions and defiance of the international community. And like all occupiers, despite being the aggressor, it feigns and plays the victim. But today it is totally exposed. President, this Council has spent decades discussing the situation in the Middle East and the Palestinian question. Meeting after meeting, we devote hours to this agenda. It is not because of anyone else. It is because of Israel that refuses to vacate its illegal occupation and that blatantly violates the resolutions of this Council. It's because of that we have these discussions. Israel also chose to refer to an unrelated incident and make misleading remarks regarding Pakistan in an effort to justify its own illegal actions and violations of international law. Pakistan's position on that incident has been clearly stated and is publicly available. The international community is well aware of Pakistan's frontline role and sacrifices in the international community's fight against terrorism. The entire world, including our partners, acknowledge that Al-Qaeda was largely decimated due to Pakistan's counterterrorism efforts. And we remain committed in this global, collective endeavor. We cannot accept insinuations from an irresponsible rogue state that is, in fact, the perpetrator of worst kind of state terrorism that we are witnessing in Gaza and, in fact, in the occupied Palestinian territories for decades. And we reject any false analogy, as has also been done by Qatar. For whatever way it interprets the statements in this Council, the occupying power must go back and read carefully the statement issued by the Security Council today. And let me read it out loud here. A statement that normally should have been stronger, but nevertheless it has been unanimously adopted by the Council. The members of the Security Council expressed their condemnation of the recent strikes in Doha, the territory of a key mediator, on 9 September. They expressed deep regret at the loss of civilian life. Council members underscored the importance of de-escalation and expressed their solidarity with Qatar. They underlined their support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Qatar in line with the principles of the UN Charter. Council members recalled their support for the vital role that Qatar continues to play in mediation efforts in the region and alongside Egypt and the United States. Council members underscored that releasing the hostages, including those killed by Hamas, and ending the war and suffering in Gaza must remain our priority. In this regard, they reiterated the importance of the ongoing diplomatic efforts of Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, and called for the parties to seize the opportunity for peace. That is why we are here this afternoon in this Council. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement. The representative of Israel has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give them the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, if the distinguished colleague from Pakistan wanted to read the statement, he could have done it at the beginning of the session. But I want to refer to your words. You know, maybe you got offended from the word of my speech, and I apologize for that. But I make sure that in my speech I stick to the facts. And the fact is that Osama bin Laden was killed in Pakistan, and no one condemned the US. And when other countries in this council attack terrorists, no one condemns them. and that is the issue of double standards. When you apply different standards on Israel, then the standard you apply on yourselves, that is the problem of this institution. So yes, you cannot change the fact that 9/11 happened, and today we mark this day. You cannot change the fact that Osama bin Laden was in Pakistan and he was killed on your territory. But I would ask you, when you criticize us, and I'm sure it will continue in the future, think about the issue of double standards, which standards you apply to your country and which standards you apply to Israel. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Israel for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of the speakers. The meeting is adjourned.